Hey guys, welcome back to the Golf Podcast. This is episode number 355. Hope everybody had a great Christmas. Hope you got everything on your wish list, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have exciting things. We're going to be wrapping up the year. Just next week, we're going to be doing our goals wrap up.
Can't wait for that.
That's always a fun episode where we look back at the year behind and we see what goals did we hit, which goals did we miss. It was kind of inspired a couple of years ago when we saw Justin Thomas do it,
right?
Where he showed that major year he had maybe 2-3 years ago, and he showed all the goals that he had set for himself and how close he had come to which ones he had hit. And it's become an annual thing, and we've been doing the same, especially with using our shot scope data to see how many of those goals we hit. So we'll recap those. We'll talk about which ones we had, and also we like to talk about some of the personal goals of Golficity, some of the things we did. It was no doubt a challenging year for everybody, but we were able to make some things happen, make some new and different forms of content. So I'm excited to do that whole year wrap up.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah.
Can't wait to look back and look forward.
For sure. So stay tuned for that next week. This week, we're going to talk about a topic that I quite enjoy, which is putting on fast greens.
Dude, you love fast greens.
I do. I like fast greens. I don't know what it is, but I have some ideas of what it is, but when we play fast greens, I find that I putt better. And I also just tend to find that if you've got a course with really fast greens, it also tends to be truer greens.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that is a personal challenge for me is if the greens aren't true, if you find that different ones are rolling at different speeds or whatever it may be, or there's unpredictability. I don't mind speed as long as speed comes with predictability, because at least I know what I'm up against. But we'll recap in a few minutes here, Mike. I want to talk about some of the fast greens we've played this year.
Sure.
Or just overall, because we've played plenty of them.
Mm-hmm.
And even some funny, interesting tidbits about some things we learned about fast greens playing at the home of golf in Scotland. Some interesting stuff we learned from some groundskeepers and stuff there about how they can't make them too fast. They have to limit them a bit, and we'll tell you why. Remind me if I forget. Well, I want to get back to that in a second.
For sure.
We're also going to do this week's Twitter tap-in. But before we do, I want to thank our sponsor, Titleist. Guys, the TSI driver represents the best of Titleist peerless pursuit of speed. They continue to invest in the minds, the material, and the technology it takes to push the boundaries of speed while sacrificing nothing when it comes to performance. Built on that breakthrough advances of the TS, which if you guys have been following us closely, you witnessed. Both Mike and I saw some great gains when we got fit for the TS series a little over 18 months ago. But then going back and taking a new, fresh look at the TSI, which is a club that, although similar in name, has really been rebuilt from the ground up. And as Titleist says, they're really taking what they learned with the TS and really starting to expand upon it. And some of those new materials, especially, Mike, that new face, that it's just picking up a lot of ball speed off of that new face.
And that sound it makes at impact.
Yeah, I think it's the hands down the best sounding driver I've ever played.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the TSI 2 and the TSI 3, both phenomenal clubs. I encourage you guys to check them out and get fit before you buy one, because really there's not one better than the other. It really depends on the golfer. You've got to get out there, you got to try both and see which one works for you. So it's an investment in your game. It's going to pay dividends for years to come. I love having that driver as a real go-to club for me, and I think you guys will do the same. So make sure you check them out. Visit Titleist.com to learn more about the new TSI drivers. And guys, if you do get that opportunity to go out there and try it, you can read all day about it, you can hear about it, but trust me, the difference is when you put it in your hands, and you'll see what I mean, especially under someone who knows what they're doing, a good fitter. So especially going into 2020, look on Titleist website, find a Titleist Thursday near you, because the Titleist Thursdays are one of the best ways, and it's free, to try these clubs and really see what they can do by getting them dialed with shafts and things like that.
Absolutely.
So it's great stuff. All right. This week's Twitter tap, in which, by the way, guys, as we always say, if you're not already following us on Twitter, make sure you do so at Golficity, and you'll be able to jump in here on the conversation with the Twitter tap-in every week. These are always fun, Mike. Always enjoy these.
I love these. I'm reading through this one now. This is an interesting one.
This one is. So this week we asked, do you prefer to putt or chip from the apron of the green? And what conditions make you choose one versus the other?
All right. So let's...
Well, we'd like to start with us.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you first. What do you think? Do
I
you
think
have a preference?
I do. I mean, if I could putt, I mean, I'm gonna take the putter out.
Yeah.
Because something about an apron is not a tight lie, but it's not in the rough. And if it was in the rough, I mean, I love that. I love when the ball's propped up nice and I can take a nice 60-degree wedge, lift it up onto the green, stop it kind of short, get it high in the air, whatever I got to do. When I'm on that apron, there's a number of different things that can go wrong with a wedge for me. So I'm taking putter all day.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it that a tight lie chip with a wedge is a tricky shot. If you, I always say the idea is to practice it before you put it into play on the course. So while I don't think it's something you should avoid learning just because you putt well from the apron, because it's still a tool that can be used. So I would say learn it, practice it, but don't go out there and do it without first being comfortable with the shot, because it is a shot that can go really wrong. You can blade it across the green. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. So you have to have familiarity with it. But it's all about going out there and going with what you're most comfortable with. So if you practice it and you become comfortable with it, then it's a tool. Otherwise, for me, I agree. The putting is very similar. And we learned this. I mean, when we played in Scotland, when we say the apron could be a distance as great as you can possibly imagine. I think the longest putt I took while I was there was something like 50 yards.
Yeah.
Yards, right? And I'm like, you wouldn't believe it, but sometimes just the way the layout of some of those links courses are, the fairway and running up to the green is cut almost as tight as the green.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it is tight. And we're playing with, Gavin from ShotScope, who locally lives there. He's an incredible golfer. And when he told me I was faced with this one, nothing really in my way, no bunkers, nothing like that. There's a really long runway and a very difficult green that would have been tough to hold with a pitch shot. And he said, I'd putt it. I can't do Gavin's accent, but he said, I'd putt it. And I'm like, come on, is he just, twisting my arm? And he's like, no, putt it. And did. And I was able to put it within about 15 feet,
there you go.
Which I can't say I would have done with a pitch shot.
Of course, right.
So it's interesting. But reading through some of your responses here.
Yeah, before we go through these, though, I'm curious to see, I'm not even scrolling down yet, how many people are going to choose the hybrid. That's a popular thing.
That is true.
So we'll see.
And the hybrid is it's a versatile a because it is a good club to use for those little tight lie.
Right, use it like a putter.
Yeah.
You get a little bit of loft, get it out, but we'll see. We'll see what people say.
I like that. All right, so we got, just right off the bat, some quick answers. Keith says chip. And Scott Walker says 100% putt. So there's two guys who are very confident one way or the other. And it's clear that it's because, like I said, it's that confidence that they have with it. Here,
what do you got?
Main course. I wanted to read this one because I think this is cool because he included his shot scope stats in here. He said, if I can putt, I putt. I have more control and more accuracy. For me, it's an easy decision. Exception is if there's a good amount of longer grass in front of me that will slow the ball down quickly. And he shows his putting percentage from that distance on ShotScope at 24%.
There you go.
But that makes the case, like you had said, Mike, it really depends on the lie.
It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because nobody's putting through the thick stuff.
No. And even, I mean, I don't want to, alter the question, but then you got the ball that's against the rough, but still on the apron. So you can't really drag a putter back through it.
Yes.
That's the worst lie, I think.
But that's where Spreck taught me that shot.
That's right.
Remember? I mean, this is one of those do not try this at home. It's difficult unless you've got the man, Spreck, standing over you and telling you what to do. But he actually had me turn my club and just pop it out with the nose, the toe, the toe of the club, and just pop it out. But that was when it was just into the rough and just resting there. But yeah, any type of real thick rough, it's immediately going to grab that putter head and just stop it. That's where you need the wedge to kind of cut through.
We got a couple of putts here. Hunter Browning, definitely putt. If I can learn how to chip, I would definitely get into the 80s. Kinger 89, always putt. Bad putt, much better most times than a chip.
There you go. And that's all about knowing your game. Kevin, and I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name here, but he says, depends on the pin placement. I trust my chips when the pin is on the far half of the green. If it's closer, I putt. So that's a good kind of nuance there too, and understanding that, knowing that it's not all one way or the other. And he's saying that if he's got some distance and room to work with, he's got some more breathing room. He doesn't have to hit a putt quite as hard. He can chip. And I get that because there's some variations of saying, I would rather hit a soft chip than a really smacked putt.
Absolutely.
Totally get that. But, for me, it's all about getting that ball on the green and rolling. I think the variable for me is in the air. If I was a better golfer and I was good at really good at chipping, I'd be able to rely on it more. But it's also knowing yourself and knowing your boundaries. And one of my boundaries is I'm not any type of scratch golf level chipper. So
Yeah.
I like to get that ball rolling on the ground with some consistency that I'm used to with a putter.
Yeah, and it's, we see guys like, I think Rory did it recently at Tiger's new course. He chipped off the green because he had like a ridge to go over. Those guys don't even touch like the blades of grass.
I know.
It's incredible.
Or you ever see where Justin Thomas chipped on the green?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
You
On
say-
the green.
I thought
He
you
was
said off the green.
No, I'm sorry. He was on the bottom of the green, Rory, and he had like a slope to go up top.
Okay, yeah.
So he chipped it up to the top layer.
The one I saw was with JT where there was some sort of impression or something, maybe a spike mark or
saw
something,
that.
and he just couldn't get a flat roll on it for putting. He chipped it over and chipped it in.
Amazing.
But these guys, the amount
Yeah.
of control they have, I mean, these guys live with a golf club in their hand.
Oh, yeah.
They are literally playing golf 365 days a year, And that's, again, it's knowing your limitations. Just because you saw JT do it on TV on Sunday doesn't mean you should
don't go
try it
chipping
on
the green.
Monday, right? I mean, it's all about knowing yourself and giving yourself the best opportunity. We always say that the real way to lower your scores is to reduce the number of mistakes. And the way to reduce those mistakes is to play the shots that you're familiar with.
Yep.
And if the shot that you're familiar with is putting, putt it.
I like this one from Manny79 because it's a little different. He says, chip it most definitely. I find it difficult to judge pace when putting through the collar.
It's, that's true because when the collar, there's a couple things. Then you get that little bit longer grass. If it's wet, that's another variable. The grain becomes a much bigger variable because if you've got long grass grain at you, it's going to slow that ball much more. I can't tell you how many times I have been unpleasantly surprised by trying to putt from pretty far off and just finding that it checks way up short because that grass slowed it down more than I thought.
Oh, yeah.
Or vice versa. It rolls through that short, quote unquote, short grass hotter than expected.
Yeah.
Here, we'll do one more. We'll wrap it up. Alex Napier says, Arnie always said, if you can putt it, do so. If I can, I will.
Yeah.
Hey, again,
Arnie
it's
said
great
it.
advice. And the advice really comes from so many golfers are far more familiar with their putter than they are with chipping with a wedge because it just happens more often. No matter what round of golf you play, you're going to putt at least 25 to 35 times, right? But you may chip once or twice.
Yeah, that makes
so
sense.
it's just the familiarity that comes from doing it over and over and over again. But hey, it's a good lead in because today's topic, like I said, we're going to talk about putting. We're going to talk about putting on fast greens. But before we do, what do you say, Mike? Let's do a word from our sponsor.
Yeah, let's do it. This episode's brought to you by ShotScope, the all-in-one GPS and stat tracking watch. Guys, buddy of mine, this is a funny story. Buddy of mine reached out just last night. He sent me a text and he goes, hey, Mike, looking for a new GPS device, something that I could just go out and play and get some yardages. So I wrote back and said, you got to check out the ShotScope G3.
Yeah.
For you, because I know Brian, he's not into stats. He just wants GPS. He wants those front, middle, back. And he said, I want to just be laser-like, all that good stuff. And I know you've been talking about ShotScope, but can I wear a watch while I play golf? That was his follow-up question. And I was like, you can, because the new version is smaller, it's sleeker. It's literally the size of an Apple Watch, if not maybe a little smaller. It's lighter, if anything. And you barely know that it's there. So it's funny. You and I always joke, it's like second nature. When we don't have it on and we're out on a golf course just filming like a one hole or something or doing something else, we always tend to look down because it's like muscle memory.
Yeah.
And when it's not there, we're so confused. We don't know what to do. But you will rely on it. You will love it. Trust us. We've been using it for years now. Check them out. Visit shotscope.com/Golficity. Get in the game with arguably the best GPS golf watch on the market.
Yeah, and if you want to gift one to a golfer, what I like is no subscription fees. So you're giving that gift and you're not worried about you're committing somebody to something.
Yeah, it's smart.
Yeah.
And last, just want to thank FootJoy, the #1 outerwear brand in golf, committed to helping us extend the golf season as long as possible. They provide us with the best gear to make every day playable. The new Hydro Series line of rain jackets includes several options that provide the ultimate protection wherever you're teeing it up this fall and winter. Hydrolite, lightweight summer rain jacket for golf in Florida, places like that where it's a little warmer but the rain is falling. Mid-layers, places like California, Carolinas, or even up here, we get that Hydro Torque, keeps us warm. It allows us to swing through that ball. You don't even know you're wearing a jacket. I absolutely love that jacket, and it is 100% waterproof. So play more golf this year. Get the gear you need to play in any condition. Yes, that means snow, guys.
Yeah.
You can play in it. Visit footjoy.com/MEDP.
Yeah, and don't overlook playing indoors. I would say a lot of us play indoors this time of year. The Flex.
Oh, yeah.
The Flex is such a great shoe because it's a sneaker you can just wear there to your indoor facility, and then you feel comfortable, you've got some traction, real stability, you can play indoors. So that's what we do.
I haven't worn another sneaker in years.
Yeah.
Just the flexes.
Just the
They're
flex.
the best.
Plus, I love the waterproof version.
Yep.
Because if you do get this sloppy weather, you're fine. All right. Diving into this week's topic. First, Mike, let's just talk about this. We've played, and we've had the good fortune of playing a lot of courses with very fast greens. I mean, the first one that comes to mind, Arcola.
Arcola was quick.
Which is just notorious for fast greens. But that's, it's not a bad thing. I mean, all of the members there, everyone, they speak in a very, endearing way about it. They like those fast greens, and it's a challenge. No doubt it adds a challenge to it. But on any day, you're running at anywhere from, I think on the lowest would be a 12. You're running 13 sometimes, and even dialed up higher, 14s on the stimp. Those are really fast greens. We also had the opportunity to play Hamilton Farm, another fast green course. What are the ones you remember?
Oh man, I mean, this year there was some good clubs we played with fast greens, but just thinking like all time, I mean, just stepping on courses like Bay Hill, playing Plainfield. I mean, of course, both were, PGA Tour stops. One was the Pro-Am. Plainfield was media day for the Barclays. You played Bethpage at our PGA. How were the greens there? Do you remember?
The Bethpage was pretty darn quick as well, and that was just like midsummer because it was a couple weeks leading into it.
Yep,
pretty darn quick. I remember Kiowa was quick. Any of those higher caliber courses, the ones that have some sort of PGA Tour
affiliation. Always quick. Always quick.
You know that they're not going to be slow. I mean, I think the slowest you're ever going to get those courses is if you play maybe 4 or 5 days leading up to it before a tournament where they'll let it grow a little bit just so they can really slice it down.
Right.
But no matter what, they're all really been quite quick.
And for those of you who are new to the game and you're like, what's the stimp? What are these numbers, 13, 14? And we did a measurement on our putting green here in the studio, and this thing is literally a pool table. It's felt
very fast,
on a flat level. It was running at like 15.
Yeah.
So 15 in my eyes is pool table speed. And
No
Arcola that day for the club championship being the next day was running about a 14, like 13.5, 14.
Yeah.
So literally almost pool tables.
Right.
So that's what that means. Now, we're normally playing like Muni courses, things like that. Those are usually at an 8 to 9.
Right.
And then your average country club is going to be like 10 to 11.
Yeah. And for our newest, freshest golfers who might be thinking, what are these numbers you're throwing at me? What's a stimp? It's a very simple calculation that's used universally in golf where really as rudimentary as it can possibly be.
Yeah, so
for
simple.
Good reason, because it kind of takes any type of guesswork out. There's just a stick that is called a stimp meter at a certain length where there's a golf ball sits on it. And when you raise it up to the appropriate angle, the golf ball releases and rolls down. And the number is just how many feet it rolls out on its own.
Right.
So if it rolls out 8 feet and stops, it's rolling at an 8. If it rolls out 15 feet and stops, there you're thinking already it's almost twice as fast as an 8.
Yep.
So it gives you an idea of how fast they are. But going back to what we mentioned before, I thought this was an interesting kind of tidbit that we learned when we played over in Scotland. There are other factors, environmental factors, that will also limit a golf course because you naturally would start to think, okay, places like the Old Course, and again, there's in that same type of PGA Tour type of caliber, they're going to be lightning quick. Well, they had told us they can only make them just so quick. They actually had to slow them down a bit because there, where you have that wind exposure,
right,
they have to be able to get that golf ball to settle and stop. If you got a very high wind golf course, even Kiowa here in the States can be similar to that. And there's other ones.
Sure.
The grounds crew actually has to keep it at a certain level where they can't go beyond that of speed because at some point, like a pool table, those balls are just going to be whimsically rolling around
everywhere.
With the wind.
So we do water and sand. They just
let it grow in a little bit more, just how tight that you're going to cut it. Plus, there's a lot of other factors. There's the grass type, and there's things like that. But I just thought that was an interesting tidbit that on those really windy courses, you actually will end up having greens that are just a tad bit slower because they need that ball to actually come to a rest at some
makes sense.
point. Otherwise, it's going to keep moving around. So I thought that was a really interesting thing. But again, that's kind of like the groundwork. But as I said earlier, I like fast greens. I like fast greens. They're often true.
Yeah. I mean, do you remember that feeling on any of those coastal courses we played in Scotland? Like, or even at Kiowa? Did you find that they were not blazing fast.
Yeah, I think that wasn't the takeaway for me, was the blazing fast greens. It was the other challenges. It was the wind. It was the water.
Like West Lanks. I mean, I don't remember the greens. This was so windy that day. We couldn't keep the ball in the fairway.
Exactly. It was the
rough.
There's every course. What's so interesting about golf in general is every course has different defenses, different ways to punish you. And in that way, it was the wind. And then if you missed a fairway, you were done. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Whereas there's other greens that other courses, I'm thinking already, like Hamilton Farm, nice, cushy, wide fairways that give you a lot of confidence off the tee because you can hit the ball and you feel like you're going to be safe.
Yep.
But then knowing your approach is where the defense is going to come in. You've got to be able to, it's going to be a fast green. It's going to be a tough green. You got to be able to get it there. And plus that course, every course is different. That course is seriously protected by some of the deepest bunkers I've ever seen. Inside.
Oh yeah.
You missed a green and you were in one of those. Add 2-3 strokes.
Yeah. It was like 2 stories tall to get up.
That was tough. Mm-hmm. But all right. So fast greens, what does it come down to? Because as a golfer, somewhere in your journey, you're going to experience fast greens one way or another. And what it really comes down to is having a great feel with your putter. So one thing I would suggest is don't change anything that day because it's faster greens with your putter, because now you're introducing a level of inconsistency. It's more so, again, laying the groundwork of knowing that you work on your foundations of your putting stroke and your putting grip and things like that, knowing that you are going to encounter them. So this is where more so it's the fundamentals are going to be that much more important. Right. And we just did a podcast just not too long ago on putting grip pressure. Mm-hmm. So if you guys didn't check that one out, go back and check it out, because this is where putting grip pressure is going to matter even more than it does on a course with a little bit more forgiving, slower greens. But greens can get just as difficult the other way if they're very slow. I've had more struggles on slow greens because my eye's telling me they're fast.
Yep, and you're leaving them way short.
Leaving them way short. But ultimately, it all comes down to pace. We talked about this before, speed and pace. And one big major way to make sure you're getting that right is your grip pressure. Make sure you're using a light enough grip pressure that you have control. If you start to get too much, and this will happen too, we talked about this in that episode. We said one thing that introduces you holding the club too tight is stress, pressure. And naturally, there's going to be stress and pressure when you have in your mind, these greens are a little bit scary.
Yeah.
They're a little fast. Mm-hmm. And what happens is you grip it tighter and you lose a little bit of your feel. And if you need feel, it's when you're playing fast greens.
Yeah.
So understanding and being aware, being a more aware golfer and being aware that, hey, these are faster greens, that subconsciously is making me a little bit tense. Let me make sure in my pre-shot routine, I'm relaxing my grip a bit.
I like it.
Because otherwise you get punchy on those fast greens.
That's what I'm saying. If you're
done.
gripping it, you punch it, they're so fast that the ball's gone.
Yep. Yeah, you're done. So what adjustments would you actually make when you're out there? Well, one thing is you're going to want to play more break.
Oh, yeah.
And the most simple way to distill this down, the reason why is sometimes on slower greens, you can get away with playing a little bit less break by just putting a little more pace on it. People say you push it kind of through the break. You kind of take the break out of it. But in this case, the risk and the chance of blowing it way by the hole comes into factor a lot more here. So whereas, like I said, on a slower green, you might be able to put more pace on it, less break, and still get it in the hole. Here, if you start to play a little bit too much with trying to take, more pace, less break, there's a good chance you're going to end up with those 3 putts because your first putt is going to roll 5-10 feet past the hole.
Yeah, and I like this idea that's labeled here about, next round, looking at where you miss your putts, low or high.
Yeah.
To determine if you're giving it enough break. Because how many times do we miss it on the low side?
Right.
Because me personally, speaking for myself, if I'm facing a very scary fast putt, odds are I'm leaving it short or missing on the low side. I'm just afraid to hit it too hard.
Yeah.
As are, a lot of us. So, it's interesting here. Count how many you do in the front 9 or the back 9 and just see where you're missing.
Right.
But then I guess the question is how do you practice? How do you improve upon it?
Well, I think one thing would be just learning to read more break into it. I think this is an interesting thing too. Again, we always talk about the things that as we learn, we're not professional golfers, we're not instructors, we're guys who are learning the game. And as we learn it, we talk about it here. One big thing as we learn is I'm learning more and more that the better golfers are just more aware. They're more tuned in to what's happening out there. And evidence of that is when we got our lesson, I had that putting lesson at Baltusrol. right?
Right.
And one of the first, he's just kind of running through my game to get a diagnosis, like a doctor would. Like a doctor's asking what your symptoms are, right? And you're aware, well, my nose is running, whatever it is. He goes, are you missing more balls on the high side or the low side? And that way he was quickly trying to diagnose what is my reading technique. Because I told him I'm having trouble reading greens. And he's diagnosing that to see, am I playing enough break? Now, if I pose that question to you and you don't have the answer, the first question is, how much attention are you paying to your putting? Mm-hmm. Because if you're not aware, if you're missing more high or more low, you're just kind of out there and just, almost unaware of what the issue is. You can't get a good diagnosis unless you know what the issue is.
Right.
So again, going back for some of our really newer golfers, let's say you're looking at a putt that breaks right to left. If you miss it on the left, you're missing on the low side. If you miss it on the right, you're missing on the high side. So that's what we mean when we say low or high side. So one thing you can do is first just be aware of it. Go out there, like we said, Take a look at your putts, mark it down. How many did you miss on the low? How many did you miss on the high side? And then from there, you'll be able to start to realize, hey, am I not playing enough break?
Right.
And then that's one thing that especially will come into play again. When you play those fast greens, tune it up a little bit. Say, my strategy today is going to be to play more break. So that you don't have to have that pace where you're like, I would rather play less break, miss the putt, but be tap in range than blow it through. I mean, anybody would, of course, right? So that's important. And another one is just a proper warm up.
Something we don't do.
We do this all backwards, don't we?
We barely, yeah.
It's like we are so nervous about what our first tee shot is going to be like. Hey, we all do it, right? So we're like, we hit the range hard and just try to like work it out and get whatever we need done. But what we don't realize is that if we want to score that day, scoring happens on the greens. So if you have a limited amount of time to warm up for your round, obviously all the important things, stretching, whatever, this is where you want to give yourself more time. We've talked before about how to prepare for a round. The more time you have, the more prepared you're going to be. Sure. Look at the PGA Tour pros. Mm-hmm. Those guys start warming up 2 hours before their round. Yeah. You remember Bay Hill? Under the lights.
Under the lights, 5:30 a.m.
Those guys were there 5:30 in the morning, lights on the range. Every one of them doing 45 minutes on the range and probably 45 minutes on the putting green before they even went out.
Yep.
That doesn't include the stretching that they probably did with their stretching coaches and everything else in the locker room.
Those are practice days.
Yeah. So that if that tells you anything. But again, what it comes down to is, being able to get a feel for the greens. And a good golf course is going to have a practice putting surface that's rolling very similarly to what the holes are rolling when you get out there. And going back to the PGA Tour pros, when you ask them, a lot of the reason why they're on the range working is they're not necessarily changing their swing that day, right? They might be working on something with their coach, but for the most part, they are locking in the conditions of the day. They're seeing what shots they can play. They're seeing how the wind is playing that day, the humidity, the heat, anything that's affecting that day, the altitude. They're getting an idea of how that ball is flying that day so that they can apply that out on the course. Similarly, when you go on the putting surface, when you're putting, you're getting an idea of how are they rolling and what do I need to do to be prepared? Because the last thing you want to do, and guilty. I mean, we've done it where especially filming, we're busy, we run out there and it takes the first 3 holes before we get an idea of the pace.
Yeah, definitely.
And then what is that? That's a lot left on the table.
Right.
You're
absolutely right.
Yeah. So that's a tough one. But again, it can be easily avoided by just giving yourself that little extra time on the putting surface, practicing before you go out, hit a couple of long ones. We talk about
and it doesn't have to be much. Yeah.
Right. Just get an idea of those lag putts and how they are. Hit a couple medium putts. Just get a feel that day for what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Couldn't
agree more.
And another thing too is just setting yourself up for success by thinking one step earlier. We talk about this too a lot, where we say good golfers have good course management. They're thinking strategy when they're out there. So one thing that they're thinking is on their approach, they're already thinking of their putt. And this, Mike, kind of lines up with what you're saying, like pool or billiards.
Yep.
A good player is going to look at their shot, but thinking ahead of where that cue ball is going to land so that they can play their next shot. Mm-hmm. Similarly, as a good golfer, you want to look at that green and say, really, especially on a fast green, I want to be putting uphill. So trying to move your target or move your distance so that you're adapting to where you're going to be underneath the hole, the low side of the hole, so that way you're putting uphill. Because trust me, you take a 14 speed green and you putt downhill, good luck.
Oh, yeah.
It is one of the hardest. Talk about playing a lot of brick. It is one of the hardest things to do in golf.
Be prepared for a 10-footer back uphill.
Right. Right. So if you can set yourself up with success by looking to get your approach shot below that hole, just that little bit of an incline is going to take some of that speed off and going to allow you to have a little bit, you can put a little bit more pace there. You can maybe play through the break a little bit more because you've got that hill slowing things down. But man, positioning your ball for an uphill putt is going to change things for you dramatically.
Absolutely. You know, that's the dream spot. That's where you want to be. You want to be putting uphill.
You always want
you always want to be putting uphill, guys. If you can do it, go for it.
And here's the last tip number 5 here. And
this is interesting.
This is something to use very sparingly and to practice before you go out there. But one thing you can do, and the only time that I've ever used this is on a very fast downhill putt, where it almost feels like you can't hit that ball light enough to not blow it by. One thing that you can do is you can adjust where you make contact on the face and try to hit out on the toe of the putter. What'll happen there is the sweet spot, obviously, of your putter is what's going to move the ball with the most impact, the most inertia. Out on the toe, what's going to happen is if you make contact, that club is going to just it's going to give a little bit. It's going to open up. And so effectively with the same speed stroke, you're applying less force onto the ball. We talk about with like driver, like smash factor and stuff like that,
right,
which is the transfer of energy from club to ball. So as you generate swing speed, you're generating energy. The next step is to transfer that energy to the ball. With a putter, you're doing the same thing. With the sweet spot, you're transferring almost all of the energy you generated with that stroke to the ball. But if you hit it out on the toe, you're only transferring a portion of that energy.
Yeah.
So a lot of people say it deadens it. It deadens the putt a little bit.
Makes sense.
But here I'm going to tell you again, try it before you go out there. Try hitting a couple practice putts off the toe of your club and see what effect it has on the pace so that you're aware of it and you know how it's going to react. Once you do, again, another thing to add to your arsenal. And it does work. It will really slow it down and deaden it quite a bit. But it's so unpredictable. I only like to use it in the most extreme situations.
Yeah, I mean, I've never used this before because I never thought of it until now.
When we're done here, try it here on our practice.
Try it on our 15.5 stimp green over there.
Yeah, you'll be almost shocked at how much it takes off. Plus, it also helps you get a better awareness of the way the club works because you realize that sweet spot is really transferring the most energy.
Yeah.
And this is where, too, becoming a great putter, like you look at Tiger Woods' putter and there's the wear mark right there in the sweet spot where he hits it every time. And that just shows you consistency also comes from hitting on the same spot of the face, because the slightest variations in towards the heel or out towards the toe is going to transfer less energy, which is ultimately going to lead to less pace. So if it's not something you did purposefully, you're going to see that the pace that you thought you were going to apply to the ball is not what ultimately ends up happening.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting one. But anyway,
you were putting off the toe for a while unintentionally. And then you fixed that stroke with Matt.
I still go out a little bit out towards the toe.
Yeah, I mean,
my impact spot on my putter is just a slightly out a little bit. And
that doesn't mess you up at all?
Well, here's the thing. A lot of people had pointed out in the comments too. And I asked Matt and I asked other coaches as well. And they said they were far less concerned with where I was hitting it on the face and far more concerned that I was hitting it on the same spot on the face.
Okay.
So even looking at a Sam Putt Lab, which is kind of like a TrackMan for putting, notice that, 5 out of 5 putts, I'm hitting it pretty much on that same spot. So that's where that consistency for me comes in. So for me, I think it would be introducing another variable to try to change that. I did change it a little bit when Spreck had me shorten the putter a little bit, just so it was more below my eye line. But trying to change that would introduce a new variable. If the difference would be if I was all over the face on sometimes I was out towards the toe and sometimes I was on the sweet spot, then it'd be like, there's no consistency here.
Right.
But if you're consistently doing it on the same spot, then,
then you're all good.
Right. You're pretty much good.
Okay.
unless that spot is something dramatic, like every time you're hitting it way out off the toe,
Right.
like a ball out towards the toe.
Right.
Is a problem. We're talking about here millimeters.
Okay.
You know.
Yep.
But anyway, those are our 5 tips for putting on fast greens. Like I said, fast greens can be a real treat and a real challenge if you know what you're doing, and if you try these tips, I guarantee it's going to help you. But as we always say every week, if you guys have some of your own tips, something that worked for you when you putt on fast greens, let us know. Drop them in the comments. You can also post them in the Facebook group where we can kind of discuss them more and learn. There's only so much you can cover in a half hour to 45-minute podcast. So if you got more tips, let's keep the conversation going and let us know.
Love it.
Yeah. So everybody, as we wrap up the new year, we'll be the first to say Happy New Year to everybody.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Goodbye, 2020.
Oof. I think everybody is really excited to see 2020 in the rear view mirror.
Oh, yeah.
That's for sure. So here's to a better 2021. And like I said, when we come back next week, we're going to come back with our big goals episode, which is one of our favorite episodes every year. And we'll also bring you guys into the conversation a little bit by having you post some of your goals in the comments and in the Facebook group. So if you don't have goals set for 2021, start thinking of them, because we will... we're going to ask you. We're going to have a pop quiz.
Yep. It's coming.
It's coming. All right, guys, you can get to the show notes by going to golficity.com/episode 355, or as always in the Golficity app, and we'll see everybody again next week.